41, we're going to be talking about romantic program music, particularly focusing on a symphony by Hector Berlioz. We've talked about program music briefly before, but it is music that is instrumental but associated with something literary, perhaps a poem, a story. So it's tied very closely together with something written. In the Romantic era, this was a very popular trend because, again, it gave the music more meaning to the point where composers would supply within the program the notes, the poem, the writing that they were basing their work on. And so the person who came to the concert would have that in their hands to give even more explanation to the music that they were going to hear. It really tied music and poetry very closely together and even brought in painting. The typical works for program music surrounded morals, political issues, and romantics really preferred program music over absolute music, which is music that's just for music but not intended to depict literary meanings. That's what absolute music means. The composer that we're going to look at that's most famous for this is Mr. Hector Berlioz. Skipping ahead. There's where it says that about absolute music. Hector Berlioz was born in 1803, died in 1869. He was a French composer, first great proponent of Romanticism in France. It started in Germany. There's a picture of him. He actually started in medical school, left medical school to study music, and was very much influenced by composer Beethoven, writer Shakespeare. In fact, was infatuated with a Shakespearean actress named Harriet Smithson. He won a very big prize in 1830, the Prix de Rome, and studied in Italy as a result of that. His musical style is intense, bold, passionate. He was considered a master of orchestration, trying daring things, innovative things, being very bold in his choices, and preferring very huge orchestras, very large orchestras. He wrote overtures, symphonies, choral music, a few operas, and also wrote about music. This is a painting I do want you to look at because it represents something called the Witches' Sabbath, which has to do with one of the things we will listen to in his symphony. The Symphonie Fantastique is a symphony by Berlioz that is actually 5 movements instead of 4, which is another way of breaking tradition, like Romantic composers liked to do. We're going to concentrate on the 4th and 5th movements. You can see the names of each of them here, but the 4th movement is called the March to the Scaffold. And the 5th movement, which again, that's abnormal to have a 5th movement, is called the Dream of a Witch's Sabbath. The program was by Berlioz. He considered it autobiographical. It had to do with his infatuation with Harriet Smithson, the actress, and he idolized her. In this program, it describes the meeting of her and how that ultimately led to his demise. You can see the romantic style featured with his fascination in the supernatural, the witches, and the grotesque. The Dies Irae is quoted in the last movement, and if you're not familiar with that, that is the Latin death service or funeral service. That would be part of the Catholic Church, and so the audience would have definitely recognized that tune, the Dies Irae. The idée fixe is a word or phrase you need to know, meaning fixed idea. That is a particular theme of music, certain tune that represents his beloved, and appears several times throughout the piece. And so that recurring theme unifies the piece. It has both literary and musical significance. It goes through thematic transformation, meaning when it appears, it's varied. And that variation tells a story of what is happening in the composer's mind with the couple, etc., how he feels about her, how she appears. Movement 4 was actually supposed to be an opium-induced dream where he dreams he has killed his beloved and goes and watches his own execution, the scaffold, where they cut off his head. And you're going to hear something very particular. See if you can find it. It's just a couple of seconds long, a couple of chords that represents the head actually falling off. It's towards the end of movement 4. Instruments are used in unusual ranges. There's sudden dynamic changes that you'll hear. And then the 5th movement is that Dream of a Witch's Sabbath, which I showed you that picture of. This is basically witches gathering for his funeral. And she shows up. So you will hear her theme come in this movement. This is also that Mass for the Dead from Latin that is quoted, that Dies Irae, and you will hear that. At least you'll find it with your listening guide. You'll know what you're listening to, but I think you'll find where that tune starts, excuse me. So listen to movement 4 and movement 5. Movement 4 is a sonata-like form. The ID fix shows up at the end in the clarinet. That sudden fortissimo is the fall of the blade. All right, so see if you can hear that. And then right after it, see if you can hear what I talked about with the head falling. And then Dream of a Witch's Sabbath starts very eerily and muted strings. You're going to hear the ID fix show up in the high clarinet, and it sounds distorted. Listen for the Dies Irae and the Dance of the Witches, which is a fugal type setting, and that builds to the final cadence. Follow along with your timeline to help you find the different things in the music. Thank you.